Has your baby been diagnosed with failure to thrive? Today, I'm interviewing specialist paediatric dietitian Brooke Pinsent on what causes it, the risks, and how to treat this condition. Stay tuned. Hi, if this is our first time connecting, welcome. My name is Melanie McGrice and I'm a pre and postnatal dietitian. I help couples boost their fertility and give their babies the best start possible with the power of good food. Make sure that you connect with me on my socials. You'll find all of the details in the description box below this video. Now today we have specialist paediatric dietitian Brooke Pinsent with us. Welcome, Brooke.
Hi, Melanie.
So Brooke, what exactly is failure to thrive?
Well, failure to thrive is also known as faltering growth, and it's when there's a slower rate of weight gain than expected or poor weight gain over an extended period of time. So you'd probably remember the maternal and child health nurse green books, and they're always plotting weights and heights in there. So we look at a growth curve of normal. And when your child sort of deviates from that, so a few measurements that are perhaps not following their normal growth, we call this faltering growth.
Right, and so what are some of the most common causes?
Well, it's quite tricky because there's no one individual cause. It's often multifactorial, but usually it's because of a decreased nutrition intake or increased nutrition needs. So decreased nutrition intake could be from many things, perhaps a structural abnormality, maybe like a cleft palate. It could be due to feeding difficulties, whether that's from the breast or from a bottle. If infant formula is being used, perhaps not enough is being provided, or it might be being prepared incorrectly. So there's many reasons there. And increased nutrition needs could be due to many things, but often illness. And this is typically the type of testing that the paediatrician might be looking at if there's severe faltering growth. They may be looking for, is there a reason that perhaps the nutrition your child's getting isn't enough?
All right. So you work at a children's hospital. What ages do you most typically see for faltering growth?
Well, faltering growth can really occur at any stage, but it is quite common to see around the 4 to 8 month age. And the reason for that is often because this is when we're starting to introduce solids, and this may have some difficulties attached to it. There can also be commonly faltering growth seen at around 4 to 6 weeks of age, and that's particularly for those infants that have a bit of trouble regaining their birth weight. I work in particular clinical areas where we may see it anywhere across the lifespan, so you can see it in young children, preschoolers, or a little bit older as well, and that's often related to the increased nutrition requirements I was talking about earlier. There may be some kind of illness involved that means growth isn't going as expected.
And how quickly is it usually treated?
Again, another tricky question because it depends on, I guess, how severe the faltering growth is. There is some evidence to suggest that we call it catch-up growth, so that's trying to return growth back to, I guess, where we were previously sitting on those little green book growth charts. And catch-up growth that is too rapid is linked to obesity later in childhood and in adulthood. So it's a fine balance between catching the growth up quickly enough that we don't have any significant impacts on development, but also not too much that we're not putting some risks in place later in life.
Is there any statistics around how fast is too fast?
Not that I'm aware of, but I do find that aiming for just a little bit more growth each week than is expected for your particular percentile is good. So maybe sort of like 10 to 15 grams more is usually helpful each day.
Fantastic. And so if someone's baby or child is diagnosed with faltering growth, is it a concern? Is it something they should be concerned about?
Look, I think it is. Not to be overly concerned, particularly if you've visited the maternal and child health nurse and maybe there's one growth marker perhaps weight that is a little bit abnormal for your child, I wouldn't be alarmed at that point, but it would be good to follow up with maybe a drop in weight session in a couple of weeks. If faltering growth has been diagnosed, it's something that's quite easily treatable. So it's something that with a really good team around you, you can help get your child's weight back on track, and this shouldn't have too many impacts later in life. I suppose the short-term concerns from faltering growth is nutrition deficiency, and this can easily be corrected, and some developmental delay can occur from short-term faltering growth, but it's more of a concern in longer-term faltering growth where we see impacts on behavioural, intellectual and emotional development. So that's what we're trying to prevent occurring by getting on top of it quickly.
Okay. Now, obviously the best recommendation if someone has got a baby or child diagnosed with faltering growth is to go and see a paediatric dietitian.
Absolutely.
But what are some of the key tips that you would share with parents to help correct it?
Sure. I agree with you. I think, a dietitian involvement in the team helping support you and your child is really important. We've got the expertise to assist with making sure that we meet all the nutrient markers and have the right catch-up growth. But I think some really important tips for families to take away is to focus on the feeding environment and the feeding experience, because this is often one of the causes of faltering growth. Trying to focus on having a really positive and relaxing mealtime experience for both you and your baby is really important. Particularly if we think about toddlers, that's a time when there's a lot of independence and a lot of, growing personality.
Oh, yes.
Food refusal can be a really key way that our little one might show their own individuality. So avoiding the temptation to force feed and put in some really negative boundaries around food, and focusing on understanding what our responsibilities are. So as parents, we provide the food, we decide what it is, when we give it, whereas your little one's job is to decide what of that food they'll eat, or if they'll eat it all. And trusting that relationship can be really important to having a good, positive mealtime experience. I think also every infant's feeding cues are different, and it can be really tricky to pick up on those, especially for new parents. So leaning into the team that's around you to help identify those cues early means that we'll be able to provide nutrition to our baby in a timely manner. And I guess the last one is often there's a temptation to add things to breast milk or fortify or manipulate the way the formula's made, but I would recommend never doing that without medical or dietetic intervention and supervision. That is something that we absolutely do use, however it needs to be supported by a team.
Yep. Fantastic. Some great tips there, Brooke. Thank you so much. And thanks so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Great, not a worry.
Now, unfortunately, Brooke doesn't see private clients, so I'm unable to provide her contact details. But my team and I have experience with infants who aren't thriving, so we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Just post them in the comments box below. Brooke, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise. And I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Perfect.